Where are you, Sue?
I'm in Punta Arenas and right on Magellan Strait, looking across at Tierra del Fuego.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Good evening, everybody. I would like to call this special meeting of Kimberley City Council for Monday, February 6th, held here on the Tanajo homelands, to order. This looks like a pretty good connection, Sue.
It's really
That's
good.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for making the effort to be here tonight. I'm curious though, did you and Woody take your name tags with you?
Not I.
They're not on the table, so I'm just curious.
Okay. I don't have it with me.
All right. Little bit of levity never hurts. Do we have any late items this evening, Maurice?
There's no late items.
Hearing none, could I have a mover to adopt? Thank you very much, Councillor Royer. Councillor Roberts seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, first up tonight is the BC Destination Development Grant, and the motion on the table is that Council authorize the submission of the grant application in the order of $1 million to BC Destination Development Fund for the rejuvenation of Kimiko Gardens. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor McBain moves and Councillor Dunneback seconds. Discussion. This looks familiar.
This looks familiar. We asked Council for a resolution to express our interest in this grant program back in December. Probably should have asked for a resolution to submit the full grant application, which is what we're seeking here tonight. The project hasn't changed at all. We're still seeking $1 million with a $95,000 city investment to rejuvenate Kimiko Gardens.
When is the due date? Did I see
Due
that?
date is February 9th.
Feb 9th.
Yeah, later this week.
All right. Council, questions or comments? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Need anything else on that? That's good. Okay, next up, and really the meat of the meeting tonight is the next iteration of the 2023-2027 financial plan deliberations. A lot of work's gone into this, Jim. Presentation was pretty thick, but very clear and easy to read. So thank you for that. And with that, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there's a lot of slides here. A bunch of them are cover slides, so we won't spend much time on those, but I don't anticipate being here any longer than a couple hours if that. We are looking for some direction to move us forward with the adoption of the bylaws. But a large part of this presentation is education as well. So if there are questions as we go through this from any members of council, please stop and I'll do my best to try to answer your questions.
And Sue, if you have any questions or comments, just verbally chime in in the event that I kind of miss your hand up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Wait here to see if we can get the presentation up on the screen. And while Maurice is working on that, Council will recognize most of this presentation. In large part, it's a continuation of the presentation from November 21st. Council will recall that we did take care of some business at that meeting, but we did not make our way all the way to the presentation. So there's been some information added, but again, in large part, it is a continuation of that meeting. Let's go over the agenda real quick here. So the first part of the presentation is just the budget recap of where we've been to date, what's been approved by council. And then we will go into the presentation, which includes discussion on property value flat tax. There's been a section added on non-market assessment change, just based on some feedback since the last presentation. Then we'll talk about municipal tax collection adjustment, the inflationary adjustment, then parcel tax, aquatic parcel tax, and the wastewater and plant parcel tax that's proposed as well. So as far as the budget recap goes, council will recall that I asked for resolutions last year with regards to the setting of the fees for the water, sewer, and garbage rates. So since that time, those bylaws have been brought forward to council for their consideration. They've received first three readings and adoption, and those rates have been implemented. Utility fees, the bill got out for the first quarter 22. And we also sought direction of approval of the 5-year capital plan. The project's proposed for completion in 23 to 27. So those have been in front of council as well. And there have been a number of projects, speaking with the operations department, that we've put out to tender already. Some of those, we've received bids back on some of those. At the council meeting next Monday, there'll be, I believe, a couple of staff reports coming back on the award of some of those larger projects. So we're well on our way, well ahead of where we've been in previous years with regards to the capital plan and getting things moving, which is great to see. So the first part of the discussion is on property value tax. This is going to be familiar to those of you who have been around the table for a few years. But again, if there are any questions from the new councilors, if you're not familiar with some of this stuff, I'd be happy to have a bit more discussion about it. So with regards to policy statements, the 5-year financial plan bylaw sets out policy and objectives within the bylaw itself. So with regards to property tax, policy is that each year as part of the budget process, the level of property tax revenue will be determined by council according to the operating and capital needs of the community. To minimize the burden on the taxpayers, the city will continue to focus on enhancing non-tax revenue sources. So every year we go through the budget deliberation process, and that tells us what the expenditures are going to be as far as operating expenditures, contributions to reserves for capital. And that essentially drives the setting of the tax rates and the rest of the financial plan process. We'll talk a bit more about property tax distribution later on. We don't have a lot of opportunity here in Kimberley to spread the tax amongst the various property type classes because most of our assessment is in residential, and then we've got it in business class as well. Those two classes represent 99.4% the entire assessment in Kimberley. So once we go through the deliberation process, the amount of operating expenditure reserve contributions determined, those numbers are applied to the assessed value of properties, which is determined by BC Assessment. They provide us with those numbers every year. BC Assessment or BCA, they're responsible to the province. We have no influence on numbers that they assign to the property values, but that's the other factor determining tax rates is it's expenditures and then it's the assessed values, and out of that gets pushed the tax rates. BC Assessment, as noted on that last slide, they assess based on 9 property classes. And they're listed here along with definitions, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is good reference for council when they're looking back and trying to make a determination of where our assessment goes, where our taxes are collected from. Of these 9 classifications, in the city of Kimberley, there's 3 that we don't have any assessment in, that being major industry, managed forest, and farm. So again, most of our assessment is in the residential and business classes, as you'll see on the next few slides here. So the numbers that we're looking at here are from 2022, and they're for analysis purposes. Obviously, we don't have the 2023 property tax information yet. We won't until we're completed our way through the budget process here. But as you can see in 2022, and this analysis does not include flat tax, which again we'll discuss later on in the presentation, but we collected just about $10.3 million of the variable rate property tax. $8 million of that was in residential. 1.3 thereabouts was collected in business, and the rest was a bit collected from utilities, a little bit from light industrial, and then recreation class, which includes the ski hill and the golf course made up the balance of it. But again, as you can see from this slide, there isn't a lot of opportunity to spread the tax collection around those classes. Also on the slide, I've included the tax rates from 2022. So those tax rates are per $1,000 with assessed value. We've also the provincial average for the tax rates, the various classes, and their ranking in the province. The province publishes, there's 161 municipalities in the province. Doing that last column, I say, for example, for light industrial, 124,153. So there's 153 municipalities that have light industrial assessment. The rest don't. That's why it's not out of the full 161. But as you can see, with the exception of industrial, Kimberley's tax rates rank very high in comparison to other communities in the province. And I've just got a slide here to give an idea of what taxpayers in Kimberley and our neighboring communities pay, just an idea of where we shake up in comparison to those. So on municipal property tax only, which is the tax collected from our residents that we keep for municipal purposes. Out of this group of communities, we rank the highest. And when we combine all property tax, which includes parcel tax, utilities, in addition to the tax collected for other agencies such as school tax, regional district, we rank a little lower on the scale there. A big part of the reason for that is that in some of these communities, Fernie, for example, the school tax, the province supplies one rate for the entire school district. So in a place like Fernie, where they're in school district number 5, Sparwood and Alford are in school district number 5 as well, and obviously their assessed values are quite a bit lower than in Fernie. So he ends up paying, despite the fact that it's the same service, paying 3 times the school tax house would in Sparwood or Alford. So that part of the total tax bill is quite a bit higher in those types of things. The next here talks a little bit more about property tax multiples. And again, this is relates to the city's ability to tax different classes at higher rates. So the base for a class is the residential class. So the multiple is 1. And then for business, for example, in most communities, I'd say all communities, business class is taxed at a higher rate in recognition of the fact that the community typically gets a higher level of service than the residential. So I think the average in BC is probably 2.5. So business pays about 2 point more than the residential class. And I think it's just a bit higher than that here in Kimberley. I've also added in previous years, I haven't included a focused discussion on the light industrial tax rate. I've included a few slides in this presentation just to give council an idea of the amount of tax we collect on the light industry assessment class. We've got 11 industrial properties in Kimberley right now. Those are owned by Tech, 3 by IE, 2 microbreweries, as well as the distillery, a gravel pit, and pro cannabis cultivating facility. Those are all of the light industrial properties we have. On those properties, the full property tax collected is $15,000. Just to put it into context. The next slide here, actually, I'm just going to go back just a sec here. So you can see that again, we had a previous slide that indicated the tax rates are quite high in class, except for the light industrial class, where in this group of comparables, second from the bottom, our neighbors in Cranbrook are about 3 times higher than us, and then get out as far as Stoke, and they're a little more than that, 3 and a bit. Just for analysis purposes on this page, if, for example, there were a new light industrial development in Kimberley, and say it was valued at $10 million. At the current tax rate, that would give us an additional $60,000 in tax revenue. But it's a fairly sizable investment for, you know, not that $60,000 isn't a lot of money, but when you look at the 8 million or 10.1 million in residential tax that we collect, include the flat tax, you know, that 10 million light industrial assessment giving us $60,000, it's not going to do much to draw the reliance on industrial tax. And again, if, for example, we were to increase our light industrial rate to Cranbrook's rate, we would collect 172,000, that same $10 million, just for comparison's sake. So if that $10 million added to the light industrial, we collect 60,000 in additional tax, it will allow us to reduce the amount of tax on the average single family residential dwelling in by about $16. Yes. Yeah, we had a revitalization incentive bylaw in place for light industrial and commercial properties, and I believe the plan is to back. It's expired years ago, but the way it read is if it was a business or an improvement to an old one that a business located in certain areas in the city, certain property class receive have to pay tax for 3 to 5 years, depending on what type of work. So, no, it's something that we've got the ability to do. You know, the fact that our rate is so low should be, you know, it should be advertised, I guess. Yep.
Councillor McBain?
Yeah, and I'm glad Councillor Roberts brought that up. I still think this should be, I'm not trying to jump ahead on you here, Jim, but the way I see it is, I still believe that we need to keep this, I still think we need to keep this low. I mean, given what we have right now, you know, raising it up is going to add something, you know, to our tax revenue, but it's really a small amount. Where I think we need to start thinking about though is, you know, I guess this is for the rest of council a little bit more broadly, is start looking at why that light industrial is not coming to us. I mean, a savvy business person, I would think, looking at, you know, those tax rates in town would, or in our neighboring areas, would be like, this town seems to make the most sense. It's going to save me a lot of money and taxes. But, you know, if we look a little bit deeper, maybe it's something that we need to up our game a little bit more to entice it, get the word out, whether it's in the paper or whatever, or through our own PR. But making sure that we have space available and ready to go for any potential industrial investors, because I think there's a big opportunity there, and I think it's one of those things. If the ball starts rolling in a certain direction, it may draw more people in. So, again, I'm not trying to jump ahead here, Jim. This is all really good information, but I'm of the opinion that, you know, we leave our rates with the light industrial low in hopes to try to get more business.
Thanks, Councillor McBain. Councillor Roberts?
So I got my microphone this time. I harken back to a recent conversation that we had about just how ready were we to accept light industrial. And I think looking at the budget, that's a really important piece of it. But we've also got to look at things like water and sewer and making it a place that people want to go. So it's a tall order. It's not just about a good tax rate.
Yeah, I think if we adjusted the industrial tax rate on those few properties we have right now, you know, we're going to get a little bit more money, as Councillor McBain said, but it's not an appreciable amount. And when we talk about a $10 million or whatever $1 million development coming in, where are they going to go? We have no land. The the Jim Ogilvie Way Marysville Bench doesn't have an environmental certification, for one. And the Marysville industrial land doesn't have sewer. It's got broken roads. It's totally unappealing. So at this point in time, we have nowhere for anybody to go. And to raise the tax rates, you know, to do that, I think would be counterproductive. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, if I may add to that, one comment about our actual industrial area is lackluster. Doesn't have much appeal for light industry. It's all broken up and looks like a broken down war zone, basically. And it's not be nice to have something to present and then say, yeah, this is what the taxes are going to be, because we've actually invested some time into it too as a city.
Yeah, good point. We need some critical mass of taxpayers in order for any increase to be appreciative. And in the meantime, you know, using it as a marketing tool to show others, you know, especially in communities that are near here, that we're a pretty good place to, you know, as an option to build.
Mr. Mayor, that's exactly the kind of conversation I was hoping that this would kind of result in. You know, something that's been talked about a bit in the past. Just wanted to get it out there. I'll ask for some action on the next slide here, but yeah, I think something we need to keep in mind. I mean, I think that's absolutely right. It's one thing to have a low tax rate, but you need something, somewhere to people to invest as well.
Just a comment, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
Sure. I just kind of, you know, building on this whole conversation is, you know, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? If we don't have an industrial park that has services, you know, maybe by bringing the tax rate up, although it's like, what are we even starting with? I guess, does it even contribute anything towards bringing those paying for services so that there is a more attractive area? And as you say, the environmental certification isn't in place, but I'm just, you know, is there a middle ground where some incremental increases can be made that would actually help to support bringing those services into play? But I guess with so little being there to even start with, there's not much to build on. Is that where we're at? Is that there's really so little that that raising the tax rate wouldn't actually make any difference towards contributing to the cost of bringing in services to that area?
That's pretty much it. Councillor McBain.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think if we were in a position where, you know, if that number was 40 or, you know, even 25 light industrial units or customers, I guess, you know, and we were gonna get, and we still had like an appreciable amount of money coming in, then I agree with you. So I think that would be more of a prudent step, is kind of incrementally build it up. I think we're literally at the bottom, and we need to, you know, we need to get to where what you're describing, and it's going to take some time. So I would like to see those numbers come up before we start making that kind of incremental change. I believe in that incremental change. I just don't think we're in that position yet.
Right. Yeah, you need a critical mass first. Mm-hmm.
Side to that is that, like, right now we collect $15,000 in municipal tax from those 11 properties. So we could double that. We're bringing in another $15,000 in revenue, and, you know, to the business owner, for example, the microbreweries, they're probably paying $15 or $16 a year in municipal tax. That, you know, that would be a double to them, would mean another $1,500, which would be, that would mean more than the additional 15,000 would mean to us. But we just have to remember that, you know, discussion about wanting investment in light industrial tax so we can reduce the residential tax. we're a ways away.
Go ahead.
I agree with you, Jim. I think, you know, we have to start somewhere. I mean, I think everybody around the table agrees, like, our goal is to try to get some more parity within the tax structures and bring that residential down. But you got to start somewhere. We've made some ground on, you know, bringing more businesses in here, but this is just the big elephant in the room. I think that, you know, we need to focus on as we move through in our, you know, in our strategic planning and, you know, the present essentially.
Thanks for the discussion. Thank you. Any other points on that? To the decision slide, the recommended resolution here is that council direct annual percentage adjustment to the municipal property collection, if any, same across all property classes in each year of the 2023 to 2025 5-year financial plan. Is the same policy direction with our current 5-year financial plan? Right. I think through strategic planning and those discussions, revisit this. We have different directions next year, but this is what I'm proposing for this time. Please.
I'm only hearing small bits. I'm hearing when Jim speaks, and I actually don't
Sorry,
see,
Sue.
I
Phone
don't
was
see.
off.
Okay, and I'm not seeing all of council, so I'm not. I'm seeing Jim and the presentation right now. So just so you know, when the vote happens, I'm not fully. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, my apologies for the rookie error on the microphone. We'll call the question. All those in favor? Everyone in the room here is in favor. Councillor Cairns is in favor. That passes unanimously.
Thank you, council.
Thanks, Jim.
Next section here, which is a discussion on tax, which is fairly unique, as we'll discuss later in the presentation here. So in legislation for the flat tax was introduced in the 90s, repealed in 1992. Municipalities with flat tax in place prior to repeal or grandfather under specific regulation. The rationale for the flat tax, as I understand it, is that the premise that every home uses the same basic services regardless of assessed value. So if a home is assessed at $1 million, other one's assessed at $400,000, those two properties use our parks, our roads, types of assets structured in the same amount. Therefore, why should be one be higher than the other? The other part of the rationale is that flat tax shelters higher value homes from full amount of variable tax rate, whereas the disparity assessed values from high and where the values from high to lowest. So I think that was the case in a lot of these municipalities that put the tax in place in the early 90s. Please.
If I may, Jim, please, just
Yeah.
build on that. So Kimberly, back in when this was, well, at the time this was brought in, I don't know how many municipalities took advantage of this, but it wasn't all that many. It was only offered for a couple of years, and it certainly wasn't anywhere near the 160 some odd municipalities. It was a few, and they tended to be those municipalities that had fairly heavy industry like us with the mine. And the reason that fit, it wasn't to shelter the higher homes, it was to encourage development. We had our miners' homes that were selling for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, which was the majority of the homes in Kimberley. And then we had new construction homes coming in that were at $200,000 or, you know, 175 or 250 or whatever that number was at that point in time. The difference between those was far enough that there was a concern that new development would not happen or it would go someplace else because of that difference. And so the flat tax was one method of getting the tax revenue in that was required, but at the same time, not scaring off any new development. So as opposed to, kind of the services thing. I mean, at the end of the day, we only have a aquatic parcel tax right now, but that's what this flat tax is. It's a parcel tax that's not designated to, a specific service. And, while it may be a tool and there may be an instance in the future where we might use that. I think at this point in time, the biggest concern I have is making changes at a time where we have assessments that are escalating at a significant rate. I mean, we went up 20% this year. And construction inflation that's happening that is causing just a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace. Where you want to reduce or bring down the flat tax or something like the flat tax is when things are stable, where things are not increasing at a big rate, so that when that change comes down, which is revenue neutral to the municipality, it doesn't have a disproportionate impact on any of the taxpayers in town. So a lot of it has to do with timing more than anything else. Anyway, thank you. I digressed a little bit on that, but yeah.
A few criticisms are that flat tax is recognized as inherently vertically inequitable, which is, it just means has no relation to the value of the property, and the perception that the owners of lower value homes subsidize the property taxes of the higher value homes. We've got a couple of tables through the balance of the presentation here. The first one shows the 5 municipalities that still use the flat tax. See, so Kimberly Trail, Dawson Creek, Powell River, and Kitimat. Most of these towns still collect a fairly significant amount of their tax revenue from industry, either major or light, or they have quite a large business class assessment base. They collect a lot of tax that way. Just as an example, Kitimat collects $28 million a year in major industry. Be nice. Trail, it's just about 10 million. I think they're at about 9.7. Dawson Creek doesn't have industry. They collect about $900,000 in major industry, 400. They collect 9.0 million in business class 6 tax. So we're really not in the same position as some of these. So the next slide here shows a bit of the history of the flat tax in Kimberley. When first implemented, it was $400 on improved residential properties, $100 on vacant residential lots. It got to a point where in 2015, it was at 76 on improved properties and 310 unimproved. And then in March 2016, there was a resolution that the amount of the flat tax be reduced by $80 a year over 10 years to phase it out. Along with that discussion was a discussion that this revisited each year. So that's what we've been doing. We bring it back to council discussion, and on a year-to-year basis, council makes a decision on what they want to do with the flat tax. This is the result of that. It's 2016, exception of 1 year, that being 2019. The flat tax has been reduced by $80, $786 in 2016, down to 2022, we're at $306. Flat tax on unimproved was at 310. It moved around a little bit, and then that direction was to leave it at $386 in 2020.
Jim,
Yes.
back on the Representative House slide 13 of 48. Municipal property tax only. Was that only the variable rate, or was ours adjusted for the flat tax?
That's just the variable rate.
Just the variable
Yeah, I
rate.
think
Okay.
later, somewhere on that slide, I do have a calculation. It's adjusted flat tax.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why that rate is high actually is because of the flat tax, the doing away with the flat tax. I think it represents a 3% increase in the variable rate each year, that $80.
Yeah, it's about $300,000, give or take.
So about a 3% increase in the variable rate each year to account for that $80.
Yeah.
So that's a significant contributor to that 25, kind of us being at the top of the pack. Yeah, there's another point I'll come back to.
That's right. And I mean, that's something that council will take into consideration this year when they're deciding what to do, is that, as you noted, there was a large increase to the assessed values. You know, 19% on average in Kimberley on residential property. BC assessment has indicated that as that relates to the July 1st, 2022 value, that potentially, just given what's going on in the market, could have been the peak, and there may be an adjustment coming through. So, you know, just given those facts, it might not hurt to just kind of see where things settle out.
Adjustments as in a mid-year adjustment?
Yeah, the way assessment works is despite the fact that they call them 2023 values, they set those values as of July 1st of the previous year, just because it takes them some time to do the assessment and then put everything in the assessment provided. So they're essentially 6 months out of date. So this table shows, with the adjustments that we discussed, so since 2016, this shows what the impact to residential property, improved residential properties at varying levels of assessed value are. So in 2022, the average assessed value for a single family home is about $427,000. So if you look around that $400,000 mark, the reductions to the flat tax from 786 to 386 from 2016 2022 resulted in an increase on average $196. Properties at $400,000, a property assessed at $100,000, $940 increase. And then there's the adjustment. So that was up to 2021, and then 2022 the table just shows what the impact of the $80 was, the other $80 reduction. So whenever there's a reduction to the flat tax, there's an offsetting increase to the variable tax rate. If your home is valued at the average, it really should even out to just about zero. Obviously, the homes valued at higher assessed values, because we're increasing the rate that's based on assessed values, are going to see a hit. Properties assessed at lower than the average are going to see a decrease. This next slide here shows what the property tax paid on those properties at the varying assessed value be if we were to eliminate the $306 that's in place now for the tax. So if you look at a property that's assessed at $500,000 right now, with the variable and flat tax, they're paying $2,967. And if it were to be eliminated, it would be $3,066. And again, as you get up to the higher value properties, assessed properties, they're going to see bigger increases, and the lowers are going to see lower increases or reductions. Yeah, it's a bit of a unique concept, again, to Kimberley. But once you kind of understand that relationship, it does give you a feel for the increases or decreases to the flat tax. Something we've discussed in prior years is, part of the assumption is that the folks that own the properties, in the lower assessed value ranges are, they're folks with lower incomes, and those people are presumed being penalized by having this flat tax. This ownership analysis we've done here, which is based on mailing addresses, so it's not 100% accurate, but I think it paints a reasonable picture. And what it says is that you can see the properties in the lower assessed value range, say for $300,000 and below, there's a fairly high concentration of out of town property owners in that group, higher than the other group. So I just thought I'd provide that for council's information.
Councillor McBain.
This is awesome, Jim. This is something I know we've talked about for a while, and what I'm seeing, and to kind of supplement your point is you know, if you lay this out on a bell curve, it actually, you know, it kind of skews to the higher side. The distribution kind of skews to the higher side, and I think you know that just anecdotally, like that average you know, that average house in Kimberley that's, you know, got a family living in it, has skewed towards the high side. And I think to kind of couple onto what the mayor was talking about right now, everybody is facing the inflation crunch. We got asked during our during the campaign about, you know, what kind of things can you do to, you know, help with inflation. And, you know, being a municipality, there's limits to the things you can do. But I think in this case, you know, the flat tax can be used to just kind of be left alone, really, in this year. And it kind of keep the increases from being skewed to one side or the other. I recognize, and I do believe that this is a regressive tax. And yeah, I mean, the home ownership thing is very, very helpful. Knowing that, you know, a lot of out of town folks own those lower valued places, but logically that you can presume that there's renters in there too. And you know, any increase on them, any increase on the landlord is going to get passed down to the renters as well. So there's a bit of an argument. You can make one way or the other, but yeah, I'm kind of just for keeping things stable this year. I think the goal should be, you know, we still want to get this thing built down, but I think just the environment we're in, a little stability would be good for everybody.
Thanks, Jason. Sue, is your hand up?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's complex, and I have a really hard time with the concept of all properties, regardless of their value, being levied at the same rate. And but I hear, you know, there's always going to be an effect that is going to happen. So I guess I'm a little concerned that if we were to, you know, we have the 2016 resolution to reduce by $80 a year, which is kind of a steady incremental way to bring it down. And I'm just a little concerned about not, you know, letting that go 1 year, and then it's kind of like, well, you know, maybe it'll become 2 years, maybe it'll become 3 years. And I guess I'd like to see the consistency and just the steady, let's keep on the path to reducing it, you know, in recognition that it is a regressive tax. And that aspect of, yeah, residents are the ones who tend to own those places, and our taxes are so high, it's really difficult for those people to continue to live in our community. So, you know, I think my position on it will be to support the 2016 resolution and kind of continued reduction of $80 per year. That's my thinking on it.
Thanks for that, Sue. It's important to note, just for clarification, that in 2019, there was no decrease.
Okay.
Council opted to kind of stay the course for that 1 year. So it was,
Okay.
yeah. So the fact that it would be waylaid for at least 1 year, since we are looking at this every year, I don't think that would be a factor. I think the other thing to point out, the complicating factor here, is that homes that were $300,000 2 and 3 years ago are now $600,000. And so I think it would be a mistake to assume that people living in a $600,000 assessed house are wealthy. We've got an awful lot of seniors on fixed incomes that are living in houses that are now worth $400,000 and $500,000 and $600,000. It's not a you know, kind of a direct line connect, or the dots are not a straight line, you know, connecting the 2 points.
Right.
Go ahead, Councillor Royer.
So, it took me a while to figure this out, about 4 years, but I finally got it now. So, after looking at the graph, what I'm seeing on the graph is when you have a variable tax and the flat tax, it seems to keep it intact, steady. And I like the idea of just not touching it this year. I really think because of everything going up so high, I truly believe that the flat tax will keep things stable. I'm 100% convinced that's how it's going to work.
Thanks for that, Councillor Royer. Further comments? Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to mention that I'm convinced that, yeah, okay, the steady state makes sense for this year. So yeah, if it's something that can be clearly analyzed each year and yeah, opened up for good discussion, then I would support the continuation of just steady state this year as well. So I'm changing my mind.
Yeah, I think if we go back to, what was it, 2015 or 16, first year of the reduction, that was the reason why we did the year-over-year review rather than the motion saying we'll reduce it by $80 per year. It was $80 per year with a review to look at what certain, what circumstances are because they in fact do change. Thanks, thanks for those comments, Sue.
And Council,
Back to you, Jim.
Council will get tired of this discussion because we do revisit essentially the same information each year, from year to year. When you're only looking at it once a year, we tend to forget. So I do bring forward the education piece, and we go through all of this on an annual basis. So it's not something that's going to slide off. Council wants to, regardless of the direction today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim.
So I'll flip to the decision slide here, and the two recommendations, one for improved residential properties and one for to run improved properties. I've got some recommended resolutions there. I've left $1 field blank. Alternatively, the flat tax levies could be left at the 2022 levels. And if that's the case, I did include resolutions there, but it would simply be that council directs staff to the flat tax on improved properties at 22 levels for the 2023 fiscal year, and the same.
So that would be the motion on the table. Yeah. Councillor McBain moves. Councillor Royer seconds. Any opposed? No opposed. That motion is carried. Thanks for the great discussion on that, folks.
Mr. Mayor, if I could bother you to have, do another resolution for the unapproved. So
Oh, yeah.
that one for the.
Do we want to?
I'm sorry, before we go ahead, I had Councillor McBain seconded, but I didn't get that.
No, Councillor McBain moved. Councillor Royer seconds.
Thank you.
You want to maybe just talk to the unapproved for a second? Give us some context.
Yeah, so the unapproved is, those are the residential properties, essentially vacant lots. And the flat tax, $386 last year, which is the same as it was prior year. I think we have slides at 286, 258 vacant lots at $386, just under $100,000. 99,588 was collected in 2022. The parcel count will have changed a little bit. If that's left at 386, it'd be roughly the same amount, the $100,000. So it's relatively minor in the grand scheme of things, just given that there aren't a lot of vacant lots.
Yeah. Councillor McBain.
Yeah, this is, I think for this year, I kind of on the same lines with the improved properties. I think we'll keep it the same, but this is one I think I'd like to be more aggressive on moving forward, just to try to motivate people to improve their lots. However, recognizing that some lots or some houses are on two lots, and it might be worth if we do take more of an aggressive stance, it might be worth homeowners looking at trying to consolidate into one lot or something like that, so they don't get dinged with this. But a standalone lot that's on its own, I think everybody would like to see it improved. So
The noxious weeds in the summertime. Okay,
Yeah,
go
If I
ahead.
could ask for a resolution on that one as well, that'd be great.
Sorry, I'll move to keep it at the 2022 rate, similar resolution to the previous.
Councillor Roy, seconds. Maurice, you're good? Okay. Call the question then. Any opposed? The motion is carried.
Thank you, Cap. So this next section here is on the assessment change. It's something that's referred to every year. It's an important part of the tax collection puzzle, but figured it might be helpful to focus discussion this year. So non-market assessment change, it's based on a couple of different factors. First, market change. So, well, with regards to the assessed value in general, it's primarily influenced by two factors. One of those being market change, which is the increases or decreases in the market value of the property, effective July 1st of the previous year. The impact of municipal tax collection on market change is essentially what we do every year. We get the assessment information, two different pieces. The change, which again is related to the value of a property, and then the non-market change. So we take the assessed value that's due to market change, and we reduce the prior year's tax rate to the point where the property tax calculation results in the same amount of tax collection as in the previous year. Our tax rate is increased by a ton. It's probably half what it was 10 years ago, because as assessed value increases, keep ratcheting that down. So that's the first thing we do when we're calculating the tax rate, is bring that tax rate down to we're on the new market assessed value. We're bringing this on taxes next year. And then we look at the non-market change. The cause of that primarily is due, sorry, go ahead. Yep. It's practice, best practice. So it's not legislation. If we did do that, you know, the 19% value increase that we see this year, that would, our taxes would go up by 15%. Well, we make that adjustment to throw it out, and then we go through the exercise of seeing what the expenditures are, and then council makes the determination whether we increase that 0 to 2, 3, 5%, whatever we need. So, yeah.
Sorry about that. What I'm wondering out loud is whether or not there's an opportunity to capture a couple of percents on assessment increase as opposed to having to take a taxation increase.
I mean, essentially, that's what when we add the 2% to 3%, like the amount of tax collection that we set on the expenditures we need, regardless of what the assessments are, it's at the end of the day. But this is really just kind of the exercise to go through a starting point for setting.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Just thinking out loud.
Yeah. The non-market change is new assessment, primarily result from new construction. It can also result from boundary extensions, property class changes, the subdivision of a mother parcel into smaller parcels that are valued at a higher overall, have a higher overall value than the mother parcel did. So that non-market change, as I said, it's in new property tax. So in that new tax, without increasing the taxes of prior years of existing property owners, so that money can be used for increases to service levels or those types of. So this table just provides an analysis of the new tax on non-market change in the last 5 years. So in 2018, it was worked out to $105 in new tax across all the properties. 109 2018, 2020 was a good year, 46,000, over 200,000 in 2021, and then in 2022, there was a bit of an adjustment to the business class, and that was related to the new Savon store. And it fell under the revitalization tax exempt bylaw. So they're getting a 3-year tax break. So 2 years we'll be getting a bunch of tax back. But
So we taxed over Wavy and we're not taxing Save-On. That's essentially the difference.
yeah, it's the way the revitalization
For 3 years.
for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the new tax in excess of the budget, which is $100,000. That's the money that could be used to pay for new services. Or to fund reserve contribution or reduce the tax increase, unplanned operating expenditures. Just to put it into context, $116,000 in market change related tax revenue, equivalent of a tax increase of approximately 1%. So, again, that the new tax on market change, if we were to get 116,000, council could be used to offset a needed tax increase on planned operating expenditures. Then I've got some other information below as well, just for analysis purposes.
So if I may.
Yep.
This non-market change is absolutely, well, first of all, it's a derivative of our building permit values. The building permit values turn into properties which are assessed. The assessment then turns into taxes eventually. I think the important thing to note is that I think in 2019, we had 32 million, I believe, in non-market change. It was down to 18 in 2020, went up to 24 or 26 last year, and then 2 years ago, and then last year, we're up at about 34 million again. Now, it's important to note that not all of those turn into assessments in that year or in 1 year. They're usually spread out over the construction of these things over 2 or 3 possible years. So it's a cumulative effects over building permits over a period of time. This is really critical, and why modest growth is important in the community is for us to be able to take this non-market change, turn it into taxes, which we then use, as Jim said, to fund the services we need without having to go back to the existing taxpayers for more money. And over the past, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years now, we have used the sale of non-critical assets to generate revenue in addition to non-market change that enabled us to keep our variable tax increase to 2% a year, which was our variable rate of inflation. Had we not had non-market change, as Jim indicated, for every 100,000 or so, we'd have to take those percents out of the existing taxpayers or else cut back on services. So I can't emphasize enough how important this non-market change and the modest growth that it is derived from is to being able to keep taxes reasonable.
Mr. Mayor, great points. So the next slide here is a preliminary calculation of the 2023 tax on non-market change. So at this point, I'm estimating that it'll be $108,000 based on the assessed value, the completed assessment roll, which is preliminary to the revised assessment roll, which will be received in April. So this number will be adjusted by the time it's said and done, but I think that should be a pretty reasonable approximation of what we will get.
It's a good year.
Yeah, it's a great year. So there's no direction needed for council on non-market change. This really was just for information. Once the number is finalized and later on in the budget deliberation process, the non-market change will play a part in the determination of the level of the variable rate property tax. So we'll be discussing this again down the road a little bit. So the next section is the municipal tax collection adjustment. So the annual tax increase. What Kimberly did back in 2016 was introduce the municipal price index. So we essentially, based on various indices, we calculate the inflation for the city, really, with the idea being CPI is based on a different basket of goods municipality. So what happened back in 2016 is we went out and shop around for different indices based on different types of expenditures within the basket of goods or within the budget. We come up with an annual weighted average of all of those types of expenditures. And that's how we increase taxes on an annual basis, or have been doing since 2006. In recent years, the MPI or the increase has deviated from the MPI for various reasons. Through the pandemic, there were some adjustments made by council. In 2020, we had a 0% increase just to kind of alleviate some of the effects of the pandemic. And 2021, it was a 1.6% increase. And we have deviated from the MPI in certain years for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, if I may comment on that, Jim. So in my opinion, that deviation was a mistake. I was a really, really strong supporter of the 0% increase in 2020. It was the very beginning of the pandemic, and there were all kinds of expectations being set for disaster, the business community, businesses were going to close, et cetera. Pardon me. And we had no crystal ball, and we had no idea. And I thought that it was prudent to do the 0% in order to do a couple of things, be a little bit preemptive, but more importantly, indicate to the community that we have your back. And as it turns out, last year, our 5.5 or 5.8 or whatever the percent was, sorry, for this year, the current year we're in, was a direct result of taking that 0% and the 1.6. Inflation is inflation, and you pay the piper for that at some point in time. And it is just simply not prudent not to take it in the year that it has been experienced, because it will, just like costs, if you don't build it today, it's going to cost more tomorrow, most likely. It's the same thing with the with inflation. I'm really, I understand we did it for the right reasons, but in hindsight, the lesson learned was we got to account for inflation in the current year. Thanks.
Yeah, pay me now or pay me later is essentially what it comes to. Yeah. Interestingly, in discussion with my colleagues, and I mentioned this a little bit at the last budget meeting, but nobody I've talked to so far is less than 5%. And it's up as high as 10% amongst our kind of immediate neighbors. I've heard in the province increase as high as 17% this year for a variety of reasons. Yeah, inflation is it's a challenge these days. So
yeah, the 17%, I heard that as well. It's a community that has to add policing, incremental policing costs that they did not account for as the population was growing.
yeah, I think the 15 level, and so they're 15,000 level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next slide, just a little more discussion about the MPI. Since its introduction, the municipal price index, it really hasn't differed that much from BC CPI. In future years, I may bring forward a suggestion that we revert to a BC CPI. You know, we'll keep an eye on the discussion. To the municipal tax in 2023 and in 4 years presented for consideration once the approved operating budgets have been determined based on direction received from council in relation to the report by manager. So the next budget meeting I've got on the next steps at the end of the presentation here will be to present the budget that's been put forward by the managers, and then we'll start to work down to this collection that will be seeking direction from council on. So at this time, no direction is sought from council in relation to inflationary increase.
Scott, go ahead.
Jim, if you don't mind, I'd just like to speak to the municipal price index.
Yeah.
When we brought this in 2016, it was a bit of an academic exercise. Also a study in, where was the money going and why were the tax increases where they were at? I mean, they were anywhere from 5 to 10% a year. For 4 years, we were able to rein it in and kept it around 2% a year. And then obviously the last 2 years with the pandemic, as we just talked about, we kind of threw those numbers out the window and stopped using that as a guide. We're finding now with inflation and these indices we base the municipal price index on, that they're 2 years old sometimes and they're not keeping up with inflation. So I think it was a good exercise in living within our means and justifying the tax increases. When we did that, we found the tax increases came way down. And if I might be so bold as to suggest, it served its purpose. It's a lot of work now for the finance staff to create something that's already outdated by the time we get the indices. So I'd like to kind of step away from that. We'll keep track. I mean, it was a good exercise to learn what percentage of our budget is wages and salaries, what percent is energy costs, what percent goes to contractors.
One of the things that that has happened as a result of the inflationary pressures that we have right now is is really the assessment on operational needs. At the end of the day, the goal isn't to minimize taxes or make taxes at zero. The goal is to look at what our operational needs are, both operating and from a capital point of view, and make sure that those projects that the community needs to invest in today actually get done. And whatever incremental money is required, we've got a number of ways to get that, one of which is through tax increases. But I think at the end of the day, we need to take a look at what our needs are from an operating and a capital point of view, with a mind that says, I don't know if we've ever had a year where the next year the cost went down. I don't think deflation is something that is ever going to happen. And so these projects that we need in order to keep the community moving forward and progressive, we need to look at making sure that those happen. And obviously we're not looking at 17% tax increases to make that happen. We need to have balance and common sense. But at the end of the day, our requirement and our needs of the community are first and foremost.
Well said, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So on to the next section here. The final section of discussion here is on parcel tax. Currently, the city collects parcel tax. It's in relation to the aquatics, and the money that's collected that towards paying the remaining debt on the construction of the aquatic center, and it also funds the operating deficit associated with that facility. Policy statement with regard to parcel tax in the 5-year financial plan law is, where appropriate, council consider the use of parcel tax as a means of recovery costs for specific capital project from the broader assessment base and specific subsets of property for the provision of amenities and services. So, and that's kind of, we'll discuss a little bit more later in this section here, but to consider the creation of a parcel tax in relation to the wastewater treatment plant debt. So that's exactly what this policy statement is speaking to here. And that's with regard to the wastewater treatment plant, it's proposed that in 2026 that be implemented. And again, I'll talk about that a bit more here. In regards to the aquatic center tax, $100 parcel tax was introduced in 2006 for the purpose of funding construction and operation of the aquatic center. I believe, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was probably introduced that initial $100 primarily in relation to the construction costs, the debt payment. Aquatic center parcel tax, unlike the flat tax, is just levied on residential properties. Center parcel tax is on every piece of property within the municipal boundary, regardless of the class. Until 2018, the revenue collected from the parcel tax was funded, only a portion of it was funded. Only a portion of the aquatic center operating deficit was funded with the parcel tax, and the remainder was being funded from a combination of variable rate tax collection and a contribution paid from the, oddly enough, the Bootleg Gap Forest Society. In 2018, council changed direction to increase transparency with regards to what the pool was costing property owners, and the aquatic center debt payments and operating deficit are 100% funded the parcel tax revenue. So it's impossible to predict exactly the aquatic center is going to cost every year. So we base the parcel tax every year budget on an estimate. And if we end up collecting more in one year, keep that in a reserve and use it to reduce the parcel tax in the next. So that's what we're waiting for now, to finalize the 2022 operating budget through the year process so that we know what that is from 2022. We can get into the 2020 tax calculation collection. So with regards to on the parcel tax, we're going to wait till we've got additional information on 2022 revenues and expenditures. So not seeking any direction at this point in time. Mr. Mayor? Yeah, I know that the overall the aquatic center, when I looked at revenues and expenditures, we're ahead of where we thought we were going to be. With regards to the revenues on their own, we had budgeted for $332,000 in revenue, and we ended up the year, these aren't finalized yet, but at $351,000, so about $20,000 revenue than we had anticipated. So we headed in the right direction.
Yeah, awesome. That's kind of good news for any modification to the parcel tax for this.
Yep.
Yeah.
So as mentioned previously, with regard to the wastewater treatment plant, this is the method of tax collection, parcel tax. The council has identified to collect the revenue that's needed to offset the payments this facility's construction. So we did the number provided in the presentation of the calculations related to the wastewater plant in, I think, January of 2022. We're anticipating borrowing this money. We get some good news on that here in the spring. We're hoping that we're going to get confirmation that we've got approval for the grant funds, which allows us to continue the project. If we do continue, the borrowing associated with it would occur in probably 25 and 2026. So whatever the rates are and the property parcel is at that point in time, will determine what the parcel tax is in relation to this, but we won't know the numbers for a few years. Yeah, this, again, there's direction required by council at this point in time. Information will be brought forward in a couple of years once we've got information available and the borrowing is completed and that facility is built. So really, unless there's questions on any of the previous information, that's for the presentation. I'm proposing that just to the holiday, February 20th, the Family Day holiday. This is tentative, but we're proposing February 22nd for a special budget date, just to continue on with the process. That's where we're presenting the operating base budget and any changes to the plan that have come about since that was approved, which would be followed up by March 6th, where we would hopefully talk about finalize the aquatic parcel tax, finalize any additions to the operating capital. And then on 20th, seek direction from council to prepare the requisite bylaws, bring those back for consideration of adoption and first readings and adoption.
Anything to add, Sue?
No, I just wasn't, I wasn't hearing anything there for a sec, so I was just gonna say, hey. I'm not
Okay.
hearing, but no, that sounds great. And I'll be available for that meeting.
Awesome. Councillor Royer.
Thank you so much, Jim. You made the presentation so simple, user-friendly. I just want to show you my appreciation. Thank you.
No, thanks. I appreciate that feedback.
Council friendly. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, if I may second that, it's always a pleasure to listen to you speak, and you always have a question, or if we have a question, you immediately have an answer. So there's zero communication loss, and I appreciate that. It really
Thank you.
sticks.
Thanks.
Further? All right. Thank you,
Yes.
Jim.
Mr. Mayor, we didn't have motion to receive the report.
Councillor McBain moves. Councillor Roberts seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Thanks, Maurice. Anything else? We're good? Yeah. Go ahead. Move adjournment. Seconder, Councillor Dunneback. Any opposed? All right, that motion is carried. We are done.
Thank you, council.
Thanks. Thank you, Sue.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for your patience with my my issues.
Enjoy your vacation.
Thanks so much.
See you.
Take care, everybody. All the best.